Hello, Body and Messiah. Today we're going to cover a lesson and it's called Messiah's Body. Black African history reinforces biblical history. We're covering this to reinforce and reinstill and etch in our minds that Deuteronomy 28:46 is something that our Most High God stated to Moshe, so we will understand, actual descendants of Israel will understand that the history that our ancestors went throughout the diaspora, throughout the entire world, will forever be a sign unto our heritage as to who we are. There's such a big push, a spiritual battle against truth just simply being spoken that we here at Teachable Bible Studies wanted to reiterate the fact. And we have to always keep in mind that the most important part of the truth being told is specifically when it comes to our heritage and our history, is that it reinstilled the fact of who we are based on Adonai's prophetic word that he gave in Deuteronomy 28. People are not recognizing this as a spiritual battle, and so we just wanted to keep your mind on this radar and keep this at the forefront of your mind whenever you interact with those who are trying to bury or cover up Black or African history. Okay? African history coincides with biblical history. All the documentation that backs up African history also backs up the Bible. Okay? So we don't want to be, as believers in Messiahs, those who work contrary to that. We're going to go over a few scriptures that Teachable Bible Studies has went over multiple times to reiterate that there is a line drawn in the sand where Adonai is basically allowing people to prove their commitment to his truth. And when you encounter certain scriptures that you may teach or you believe in, you're going to have to make your election sure. We're hearing a lot of people try to fight and war against actual true history being taught about African Americans or just Africans throughout the diaspora, throughout the entire world. And so we cannot not teach about ourselves. Think about this one thing, Body of Messiah. Out of all the people whose histories are being stifled, there is a law being made against African American history being taught by this governor in Florida. Now, doesn't that show you how the enemy is trying to ratchet up the tension? Okay? But we, as individuals, have to teach our current and next generation who we are and continue to profess that. When it comes to our history as far as slavery goes, even before slavery, okay? Biblical history parallels us. Teachable Bible Studies has reiterated this over and over again and reinforced it with a series called TBON, Lesson 2, Take Back Our Narrative. And the title of that series starts off as Africa Throughout the Bible. And we pull up historical documentation, things associated with the namesakes for different regions throughout the Promised Land, which we show and prove that history proves is the Father's land, Africa. Okay? Now, as you continue on this path during this Great Awakening, we are pointing out some scriptures that you're going to have problems with if you choose not to abide by the whole truth of his word. So one specific that we always focus on is explaining the boundaries of the Promised Land. In Genesis chapter 15, verse 18, it gives three different borders. The river Euphrates, the river of Egypt, okay, or the river Nile, basically. And then there's something called the Great River. In the past, I used to think, Tasha, that maybe the Great River was an adjective for one of the other rivers. But what I found in looking at some of the historical documents and maps of Africa, the Great River is this river channel here. And bear with me, I did my best to draw these river channels and lakes that are a part of Africa. But you'll see the documentation that shows when you look at the Africa Throughout the Bible series, where we show you the Great River is specifically named that in the Father's land. There's also indigenous tribes or groups that live along the Great River, and they speak forth in the name of etymology, the language they give, and the phrase for it translate into the Great River. So these boundaries here, you cannot apply the United Nations defined region of so-called Israel. Does not abide by this standard, body Messiah. So a decision has to be made. And always question yourself, why is it there not a law against teaching Chinese American history or um, Italian American history or any other historical group, um, Native American history, which come to find out is a part of Black African history also, okay? And them also being descendants of Israel. But that law was created because this is once again the beast system warring against the children of the Most High God. Revelations chapter 12 is just true. When you read it talking about there's a war against the seed of the woman, and a war specifically against those who holds on to the commands of the Most High Yah and also hold to the testimony of Yeshua HaMashiach. You know, that is us. And so on every angle, there's going to be a battle and a struggle to try and fight against truth because the truth breaks strongholds. Now, if you try and war against this historical facts that are happening, and like I said, they got that uh, silly phrase, critical race theory, out there, which is just a silly phrase. All of these things that coincide with biblical scriptures coincide with actual history, and they're facts. They're not made up. They're not imaginary. This is something that is not extremely far removed from our ancestry. As we know in Deuteronomy 28, it talks about all types of atrocities that our Most High God prophesies would happen to us when our ancestors went into idolatry. And lynchings, for examples, are something that literally can be carved out. And when you see it in Deuteronomy 28, and they're still happening today, but they're being masked and paraded as suicides or something like that. But we in the Black community, the majority of us know when certain things have happened to some of our people, we know what's happened to our people. And the so-called investigation that usually doesn't take place also reinforce the fact that these are lynchings, present day lynching. So we have to be on our guard and aware of these things, body Messiah. This great awakening is going to happen with your cooperation or not, because the time has happened, because our Most High Yah deemed so. Think about this. If you're going to fight against history, how would you explain Deuteronomy 32? Deuteronomy 32, where Adonai gave Moshe a song for our ancestors to remember, where he said, I know you're going to soon go back to idolatry. So since you're trusting in and believing in non-gods, I'm going to replace you with a non-people. And partial fulfillment, the first half of this fulfillment of this prophetic word came in 2 Kings chapter 17. Okay, when the Babylonian kingdom ruled over Israel, the Babylonian king brought in settlers from the north, okay, the north, to come and replace the men, the Levitical priesthood, okay, and it's partial fulfillment of Deuteronomy 32. But when you acknowledge that these new settlers, as we refer to it in Surgical Bible Studies, came from the north, and this fulfillment of this prophecy came true, it did not involve any of the people from the southern region for a reason, because this is the actual promised land. This is the region where most of our people are located at. So we have to be aware of that. As we move on in teaching scriptures and the word, God's prophetic word is going to be strengthened by truth. It will dissipate and be torn down which is the plan of the enemy if you reinforce it with a lie. So you can't alter this. And let me mention one other thing. We have to be strong enough to admit the whole truth about Adonai's word, whether or not it is favorable towards the children of Israel and not so favorable. Okay? So, for example, the reason why these things happen is because of idolatry. We have to acknowledge that whole truth. God allowed the enemy to come in because we were focusing on worthless idols that had no effect. And he said, okay, I'm going to allow these things to happen to you. But the fulfilling of Deuteronomy 32, Adonai says, if it were not for the mocking of the enemy of Satan, he would discard us and be done with us. But he said, because Satan is going to sit there and mock and say, ha ha, you can fulfill your word, Adonai said he's going to forgive our sins and he's going to bring us back to his command, to his standard. We will be his people and he is our God. Okay? So you'll see in present day, as people war against the whole truth of history, the people in the United Nations defined region of Israel, some of them still are warring against that fact. The time has come where Adonai is saying, soon I'm going to have my people back, and my people are going to know who they are, and they're going to return to my standard, and I will bless them above and beyond. They war against that by fighting against truth. So we have to be humble enough, those who are actual descendants of Israel, to accept the whole truth. So just say, for instance, when we look at that the movie The Woman King, like I said, it should have been called The Woman Queen. When you look at that movie, and I'm not trying to spoil anything for you, the region in which the warring factions and the women of Dahomey were from is also a land that we cover in Surgical Bible Studies, known as the Negro Land Map, was also specifically called the region of Wihada or Judah. Okay, that's the kingdom of Judah, and that whole region. Even the person who is deemed as the antagonist or the person that the star of the movie is fighting against, he is a descendant of Israel. But we have to accept the truth that our people engaged in and partook in what pleased the European, which was slavery. That's not a happy thing to celebrate, right? But even in watching a movie like that, there are teachable moments. Both of those sides that were warring against each other, engaging in this activity, right, were actual children of Israel. And it fulfills another prophecy in Deuteronomy chapter 28, specifically verse 68. For those of you who have a Tree of Life version, look it up. In Deuteronomy 28:68, it specifically says, you will even sell yourselves by the Messiah. But we being blessed to see such a time of this, of Ezekiel chapter 37 being fulfilled, we know in our spirit and in our heart, in our ruach, never ever again. We will not turn back to idolatry. We will not turn back to the foolish ways. We will focus on the Most High Yah. We will do according to his standards, to the best of our capabilities, and turn not to the left or the right when it comes to honoring him. And honoring that entire truth keep us out of going down a path of being delusional or going back to repeat the past. Never again, body of Messiah. I want you to also be aware and acknowledging his whole truth. We covered Deuteronomy chapter 23, where we talked about specific groups of people that you are never to seek their shalom. And so we have to keep that on the forefront of our mind, because sometimes there are spiritual ties that are bound with certain groups of people that can be carried down, and specifically through certain organizations, right? At the top and head of a lot of these organizations, those people very well know who they are and what they're doing to honor Satan. But at the lower level, people are not aware. Even some of our people who are drawn into these organizations. But the only way that we can break those bonds is by professing and speaking the truth and making sure we don't engage in some of the activities that they're involved in. So, Body Messiah, I'm going to share some of these old lessons with you so that you can, those of you who are not familiar and might have just become a member of Sajiko Bible Studies, to go back and study and learn. Specifically, like when we talk about the boundaries of the Father's land, right? There's a lesson that's called Messiah's Body. Where should you stand regarding the Palestinian-Israel conflict? In this lesson, we refer to various lessons that talk about TBON, Africa throughout the Bible. And it gives you a brief synopsis of how we cover every detail of us acknowledging the entire truth of Adonai's word. And so you can look at that lesson so you can refer to other lessons that are attached inside the description of this lesson. Okay? If you're interested in. And it'll make you very clear of the historical documentation that are linked to showing you what the actual boundaries of the promised land or the land of Canaan is. And then we have this lesson here, Messiah's body. You are never to seek their shalom, where we go into detail about Deuteronomy chapter 23. In some translations, like the King James Version or Tree of Life, it may be verse 7 or 8. It just depends. But the specific group of people that we make clear in this particular Bible study lesson are who are to be looked at as those who have a hateful spirit towards the descendants of Israel are the Moabites, the Ammonites, and the Amalekites. Sorry about that. And the Amalekites, I believe in the description of this video, there's an actual descendant of the Amalekites that specifically talks about how he was reared and raised and a way in which to honor the Satan, Hasatan, and a way in which goes against, to fight against, and to attack actual descendants of Israel. So by the Messiah, when it says you're never to seek their shalom, you won't see Sajiko Bible Studies chasing after people who we believe have that type of hateful spirit. It is on them to make their amends with the Most High. Even that gentleman there, he's coming forth and being honest, and I'm pretty sure he's going to take a lot of heat, possible death from some of his ancestors or relatives. But he is at least speaking the truth for such a time as this, because God deems so, and waking up a lot of our people, okay, to understand that we can't bury and smother history because of that being so vital to us. Listen, Black history is who we are. It's not something that can be written away because of a law or someone to tell you, no, you can't teach about yourself. That's who we are. It's forever a part of us. And the Bible specifically is a part of us. That's who we are. We will never be able to separate ourselves from that if we care to abide by Adonai Elohim's standard, Body Messiah. Now, let me stress a couple other things. Historical truth will destroy strongholds of Baal worship. And we know this for a fact because we show how Baal worship throughout Sajiko Bible Studies. We have lessons that show how Baal worship from time of old has come out throughout history. And of present day time of how the attire that those who worship Baal, the attire that they wore is directly linked to Roman Catholicism, that denomination. And furthermore, the attire that they would wear comes on down through what present day Klansmen would wear. So Baal worship is tied to white supremacy, by the Messiah. There's no tiptoeing around that situation there. We've proven it and shown you that throughout history. The bloodshed that the Roman Catholic denomination engaged in was to honor Baal, Satan. The bloodshed that white supremacists engaged in attacking our people, and hanging them on trees and lynchings was a part of Baal worship, them honoring Satan. Okay? So we have to continue to profess truth to break strongholds. There's a many a times I've engaged in discussions with some people who want to fight against the truth of history, and I remember one particular person was talking about how Confederate history should be a proud history, and that it's just about states' rights. The state was fighting against their right to choose their laws and not be ran by the federal government. And as I'm sitting there and I'm listening, I'm like, yeah, yeah, I agree. But it's the state's right to do what? What specific right were they fighting over? Okay? It wasn't their right to drink tea or coffee. They were fighting over their right to oppress and enslave my people, to treat them like animals, to breed them like animals, to castrate, hang, to brutalize, to force to work for free my ancestor. That's the right they were fighting over. There's no way that you can write that off and change and alter that and make it sound better. That's the right they were fighting over with. And I wanted that person to wake up and not be overtaken by this strong delusion. Because some people will proceed in that, like, oh, that's good enough. They were just fighting over states' right. But what right was that? That right was to demean and oppress and harm my people, to have the right to tear the families apart, to sell off their children. And so this person knew that whenever they came to me, there's no way I'm going to let you proceed in this delusion. And by the Messiah, I pray that the stronghold finally, sometime or another, got broken over that person. But I don't want to stand before the Most High Yah and him look at me and say, why didn't you speak the truth? Okay? That's not going to be on me. That's on them. I spoke the truth, and it's whether or not they're going to make amends with the Most High and be able to have the courage to proceed in that. Well, body of Messiah, I want y'all to, I hope y'all learn something from this lesson. Never, never deny the truth of history, entire history. This is the only way we're going to continue to tear down these strongholds and overtake back territory on a spiritual level for the glory of the Most High. Thank you so much for joining me for this lesson. And as we always say to you, may Adonai Elohim cover and surround you and your family, shield and protect you all, and envelop you all with his shalom peace. Goodbye.